But when it comes down to it, I guess it would be important to ask, why is plagiarism a problem? Why does it even matter? I mean, in a sense, what you're asked to do in a research paper is to present other people's work. Right? In a research paper, it's not a reflective essay. Right? A reflective essay where you're just writing what I think about something. You're asking me to do research, and so I'm going to present what other people think. So why is plagiarism that big of a deal? Why is it that it's something that could get you in trouble not only in a class, but maybe in a university setting, a larger setting as well? And this is one of the cases, of course, where there is this kind of blurring of lines that has been taking place over the past couple decades. But I think it's important to recognize there are a couple of things, especially in a Christian context, that make plagiarism problematic and make it something to avoid. First of all, is as the Oxford Dictionary says, it is literary theft. You're taking something that belongs to somebody else, right, and presenting it as your own. Now, yes, it might not rise to the same level as if I broke in somebody's house and took all their jewelry and then went and sold it and got money for it. But in an academic sense, that's essentially what you're doing. Right? I've broken into somebody else's house, into their source. I've taken something that belongs to them, and now I am presenting it as my own for you to give me a grade. So there is a theft nature to it. Yes, it might not, rise to the result to the same kind of thing as if you're physically stealing somebody else's physical goods, material goods, but it's still, again, the same kind of thing. I remember some of the things that Jesus talks about in the Sermon on the Mount, right, where you might not actually do an action like adultery, killing your brother or sister, those kind of things, but it's the intent that is also important as well. So the act of stealing might be different, but the intents behind it are the same. Secondly, plagiarism is a problem because of how you are presenting yourself. Plagiarism happens when you're taking somebody else's stuff and presenting it as yours. So you're presenting yourself in a way that is false in doing that. You are lying about yourself. That these are my words, these are my ideas, when they are not. So it probably should be easy for us to see why that would be incompatible in a Christian setting. And then finally, it's incompatible with a variety of the teachings of Jesus. I'll just mention a few. Right? The first is the golden rule. Would you want somebody else taking what you have worked hard on to come up with, and then saying, oh, this is all mine? And completely ignoring all the effort that you had put into it, but they are claiming that it's theirs. Well, most of us wouldn't want to be treated that way. We put in the effort, we put in the hard work. Well, the same kind of thing should be applied to scholarship. Now, often the people that have written these commentaries, these journal articles, maybe sometimes even some websites, have spent a lot of time and effort putting these things together. Right? If we're talking about a book or a journal article, we're talking years of effort putting that together for someone to say, oh, this is mine. That doesn't seem like it was something that would be according to the golden rule. Other teachings about humility, honesty, those are other things that would fit into why plagiarism would be a problem, especially for a Christian. However, there are a couple of things to think about with respect to when something is not plagiarism. There are a couple of things where it is not, a couple of times when something is not plagiarism. And that's important to recognize too. First, if something is your original work, okay, these are, I've gotten them here from the Purdue Online Writing Center. When it is your original work, it is not plagiarism. Now, If you take a paper that you have written in another class and presented it in a different class as your own original work for that class, it is plagiarism if you have not talked to your professor about if that was okay, if you've talked to the professor that you originally written the paper for. So you can self-plagiarize. It is a possibility. Right? So if you ever want to submit I'm going to do a paper in this class and some other class at the same time, and I want to submit it for both classes, make sure you talk to both professors about that. Right? If you want to submit a paper for let's say you write this paper, and next spring, this paper could fit into a class you're doing. You need to talk to me, and you need to talk to whoever your professor is for that class as well, because you can self-plagiarize. But if it is your own original work, it's not plagiarism. If it is something that you've experienced, right, it's not plagiarism. Right? So you don't necessarily have to cite yourself, right? Doing a reflective essay about your personal experiences growing up, and you say, when I was 9, this happened to me. And then you don't have to put in like parenthetical citation, own experience, April 14th, 2007, right? So there's certain, when it's your experience, you don't have to cite it because it's not plagiarism. When it is common knowledge, now, sometimes the question is, what consists of common knowledge? When in doubt, cite something. But there are certain things we might assume to be common knowledge. Things like George Washington was the first president of the United States. Common knowledge. You don't have to cite that information. You don't have to find a book to cite that information. There are things that we would think of as common knowledge. The Earth revolves around the sun. Things like that. Now, if you're not sure if it's common knowledge or not, and you've come across it in a source, cite the source. If you're not sure. But if it's something that you could legitimately think would be common knowledge, then you don't necessarily have to cite the source. If it's a generally accepted fact, like the sun revolves around the earth, you don't have to cite that. It's a generally accepted fact. Now here again, there might be some places where there might be a generally accepted, you might say, well, is this a generally accepted fact or not? You could always ask your professor, or if you have some sort of source that you are working from that says that, then cite it. But probably you don't need a source to tell you that the earth revolves around the sun, that the sky is blue and the grass is green. Now obviously there can be some things that are more than that, but there are certain things that you don't have to cite. So, how do I go about avoiding plagiarism? What are some things I can do to make sure that I don't engage in plagiarism? Hold on a second. I think I have mine. Okay. I didn't have my notes a little bit different here. Let's look at the following examples and see if we can talk a little bit about what constitutes plagiarism. Look at this first row, that'll probably be better. All right, so I'm doing my paper on woman taken in adultery, come across the source, all right, from the Stone Campbell Journal, and here is a passage, right, 3 sentences that from that source. And the earliest witnesses to the text of the Gospel of John uniformly omit the pericope, including Patience via Tesron, 2nd century, And the 3rd century, plagiarize 266 and 275. Origen died 253, 254. Does not include the passage in his commentary on John. And Tertullian died after 220. Never cites the passage or alludes to the story. Right? So that is what the original author said in his source. Which of these are plagiarism? Let's look at that first one. The early witnesses to the text of the Gospel of John uniformly omit the pericope.
Yes, word for word.
Right? There's no quotation marks. I mean, that's essentially that first sentence. Second, as Bridges notes, the earliest witnesses to the text of the Gospel of John uniformly omit the pericope. All right, we got one now.
Well, yeah, because there's no citation.
There's no citation. I mean, there's at least the attempt of something, right? And so there's, it's not as bad as that first one. But what else is problematic with this one? There's no quotation marks, right? So if I read this and you don't have quotation marks, I'm assuming that you're putting it in your own words, even though you say Bridges said this. All right? So this should be in quotation marks, because it's still the exact word. This one. The earliest manuscripts of the Gospel of John do not have the passage, citation, origin, and Tertullian do not include the story in their writings. Plagiarism or not?
Sounds like that. The writer put it in their own words.
Okay, put it in their own words. It's not the exact. All right, but is this plagiarism or not? It's not cited. So even though you put it in your own words, it's still coming from this source. So there needs to be some sort of information to say that I got this from this source. Okay. So this poor citation is an attempt at a paraphrase, right? Or a summary, we might say as well, because it's a little bit shorter. But there needs to be some sort of citation at the end. It's not the exact words, but this is not general knowledge. Would you say that the fact that citation, origin, and Tertullian do not include the woman taken into adultery as common knowledge? No, it's not something you could go up to somebody and say, hey, did you know that in their commentaries on the Gospel of John, citation, origin, and Tertullian don't include John chapter 8? Yeah, I know that. Everybody knows that. All right, not going to happen. As Bridges notes, early Christian writers do not include the passage on the adulterous woman in their writings. Is this plagiarism or not? Now, it might be hard to see, but there is a little bit of what we might call footnote. All right, so there's an attempted citation here. So is it plagiarism? No, this isn't plagiarism. All right, because it's in their own words, so there's no need for quotation marks, and there is a citation. All right? Now, how about this one? As Bridges notes, early Christian writers do not include the passage of the adulterous woman in their writings. Footnote: neither citation, origin, or Tertullian cited. Why?
They didn't do that last month as well.
Right? So anything after the footnote, if there's no footnote, it's assumed that this is your own work. But it's not. Right? You got it from this information. So the footnote needs to go here. Now again, if you did this in my class, right? You did this in this class, I would probably say, okay, this is poor citation. I'm not going to count it as plagiarism in the sense you get an F, but it's poor citation. So you probably lose some points for citation errors, not plagiarism.
If you have like 2 or 3 sentences, like from one source, do you have to like put the footnote after every sentence, or?
What you should do is put the footnote at the end of the, so if you have these 2 sentences, putting the footnote here instead of putting a footnote here, a footnote
So
here.
even if you like quote something and then the next sentence is a paraphrase,
I would still put it at the end. Now, if you did cite both places, that's not a problem. But putting it at the end that would say to me, okay, this entire thing would be coming from that source. All right, and so put it at the end of whatever information comes from that source.
Can't you decide it if you put his name in parentheses?
You can in certain style manuals, but not for what we use in biblical
Oh,
studies.
is it APA?
No, it's SDL.
Oh, okay.
And SDL uses footnotes and endnotes
Gotcha.
versus APA and MLA, which uses parenthetical citation.
Okay.
If you did that, though, it wouldn't be plagiarism; it'd be poor citation, and so you lose the point. In this class, especially, since that's one of the things you really need to focus on. But yeah, I mean, in that case, you're at least demonstrating that you're trying to cite. So it wouldn't be plagiarism per se; it would just be poor citation. Let's look at another one now. We'll just use these two examples, and then we'll move on. So another article in the same case. The text here, John 7:53 through 8:11, is peculiarly vulnerable to interpretation. The history of interpretation of this text demonstrates the power of interpretive interest to read the text against its own shape. Which of these are plagiarism?
Two. Let's plagiarism.
All right, two would qualify as plagiarism. I probably wouldn't consider it because you're making an attempt to cite it because you got the author and you got the journal it comes from, but because you didn't provide me the citation, I would say that's not plagiarism, but it is poor citation. But technically, it could, because if you didn't include this first part. If you just said, this passage faces many challenges, one of them is the way in which interpreters read into the text their own preconceived notions. Now that would be plagiarism if you didn't put that first. So these two would be good. This one, poor citation, not so much plagiarism.